Welcome, everyone. Thank you for being here tonight. My name is Sarah Audsley, and I'm the Writing Across Media Facilitator at Vermont Studio Center. Thank you for joining us tonight for virtual visiting writer reading with Tiana Clark. I'm so pleased and happy to be hosting Tiana tonight. I was in the back of the Henry Holt barn at the Frost Place really long time ago, listening to poems, and I'm thrilled to have Tiana here. Tiana Clark is the author of the poetry collection, I Can't Talk About the Trees Without the Blood, winner of the 2017 Agnes Lynch Starrett Prize and Equilibrium, selected by Afaa Michael Weaver for the 2016 Frost Place Chapbook competition. Clark is the winner of the 2020 Kate Tufts Discovery Award, a 2019 National Endowment for the Arts Literature Fellowship, recipient of a 2019 Pushcart Prize, a winner of the 2017 Furious Flowers Gwendolyn Brooks Centennial Poetry Prize, and the 2015 Rattle Poetry Prize. She was the 2017-2018 J.C. and Ruth Paul's Poetry Fellow at the Wisconsin Institute of Creative Writing, and Tiana is the recipient of scholarships and fellowships from the Loaf Writers Conference, Sewanee Writers Conference, and Kenyon Review Writers Workshop. She is a graduate of Vanderbilt University and Tennessee State University, where she studied Africana and women's studies. Her writing has appeared or is forthcoming from The New Yorker, Poetry Magazine, The Washington Post, BQR, Tin House Online, Kenyon Review, BuzzFeed, American Poetry Review, New England Review, Oxford American, which I'm really interested in your piece about the sweet potato pie you wrote, and Best New Poets 2015, and elsewhere. She teaches creative writing at Southern Illinois University at Edwardsville, and also is recipient of an Amy Lowell Traveling Scholarship.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate it so much. Thank you for that wonderful intro. Can everyone hear me all right? Yay. Thank you all so much for your patience and kindness. And thank you, Sarah, for handling the pivot. I think we've all had to learn how to pivot within the last year and a half now. And the new Zoom frontier, Zoom snafus happen all the time. And if there's any educators out there, then you know that happens all the time with your students and with myself. I've been in the middle of a lecture before where Google Fiber just went off in my neighborhood and my whole class froze. And I was like, well, I just took a walk outside. So we all are learning to lean into the pivot. So thank you again to Sarah and to the Vermont Studio Center. I'm really excited to be here with you virtually on a Tuesday night. I'm in Nashville, Tennessee. It was in the 80s today. So I got my arms out. It's warm. I'm going to start with a newer poem called The First Black Bachelorette that came out in the Kenyon Review a couple years ago. The First Black Bachelorette. I dedicate this to all of you who watch trashy TV every now and then. It's okay. It's okay to be erudite and also watch trashy TV. When Brian was kissing Rachel and slid his hand inside her hair, her long, long hair, I wondered if he felt threaded tracks of weave and what he thought when he felt her weave. Was he startled or did he know? But when he reached for her, I felt his fingers on my scalp too. I did through the TV. I swear I was wincing. My white guy doesn't like fake things, but I like my fake hair long and my real hair protected, my glory tucked and hidden. Something easy and fast. I'm hoping it will grow too. I wonder who does Rachel's hair on the show, blending her leave out with her natural hair. Who slicks her edges down with good grease and a boar brush when the wind blows back her baby hairs. There was once an episode on The Fresh Prince of Bel-Air with the actress Tisha Campbell. The premise, they were on a date and stuck in a basement for hours. She stripped off her weave, fake nails, contacts, and eyelashes. She molted. Will then asks, now what else on your body can I get at the mall? RuPaul says, we're all born naked and the rest is drag. Derek has a list of funny drag names and I want one. I want to be called what I really am or what I pretend to be, which I guess in a way is me, or someone who I think might be beautiful enough to be approached, discovered. Someone who doesn't have to pay for Mover, someone who who walks into a party and doesn't have to be anxious because the privilege of their beauty makes them at rest and people find vacations in their faces. I require something fake, woven and glued, stuck to my body, but not of my body. How does a body even start? Sometimes my eyes feel thick and weird from fresh eyelash extensions. In the beginning, my head hurt from the braided ropes of hair encircling my scalp tight. You want it tight, she says. You want the cornrows so small that your fake hair looks passable, and hope you take the pain. It takes so damn long to be almost beautiful. I've sat in salon chairs all day with Black women behind me, laboring and taming my mane. I like the pattern crop circles carved into my scalp right before the wefts of somebody else's Brazilian hair are sewn like human icing into mine. Delicious. I want the fire to smell a type of threaten me and back away. I want the fire to know I was already consumed, burned inside my belonging. There is a hankering, a hungry choir that craves money and porn, meaning my thoughts are well lit, staged, and faking it too. Even my soul is pre-oiled, fluffed, bleached, waxed, nubile, licking and staring down the camera to ash. The trick is looking like you like it, like you enjoy getting slammed, which is why I like being groomed, getting yanked, painted, cut, and plucked. I've been on all fours as a woman ripped me from my center where I split in jeweled halves. I did not yell as I bit my lip, grabbed the corners. I enjoy how people look at me when they think I might be beautiful. I enjoy porn best when I think they might be enjoying themselves too, but who can say really? Not showing pain gets you paid. It takes a lot of money to look this trashy, Dolly Parton says, and yet Rachel, who scratches your dandruff like tea cake in chapter 11 and their eyes were watching God, who detangles and combs your hair with deep conditioner, who wraps your hair at night. Has Brian seen you in your silk bonnet yet? You know it's real when you're riding on top with your hair wrapped. Lala says she was never ugly, just poor. I want my teeth fixed and chiseled, but veneers are so expensive. I hide my coffee-stained crooked things. Cardi B raps, got a bag and fixed my teeth. Hope you hoes know it ain't cheap. So I try to hide the unevenness in my teeth when I talk, which means sometimes I don't talk when I can see myself. I try to hide the gaps and how sharp my teeth really are, how animal, how lower class, how cash poor my mouth really is. I don't look pretty when I come, my mouth open, my jaw slack and sideways pulling spit, my deadened eyes fixed on one object in the room, this time a chair, this time a corner half in shadow. This time I just wanted to watch a Black woman on TV fall in love for entertainment, for escape. The best cure for microaggressions is shitty TV and again, Cardi B. Ahmad says for us American Blacks, we are post-apocalyptic. The end is not near, but behind us. We are what remains of our 6 million dead. We are what was not hung, dumped, or flung from the zong, splashing and graveless, lest you think the ocean a tombstone. The ocean is not scared or sacred enough. But we out here anyway, trying to save ourselves still sprinkling black pepper behind our feet as we run away. But there is no north now. We find the drinking gourd within ourselves, guiding stars within our own blacklit blood we glow. Maybe it's true then that beauty is a type of survivor's guilt, a sackcloth I suffer and itch and injure from and for, or rather that I'm seen through sin. Dirty Hottentot Zoo is my body. I was such a terrible Lady Macbeth in high school. Her mania didn't make sense to me until it was activated in me when a man left me in my blood in 20s. There's a type of grief I carry in my hands, some dark, unwipeable thought, some liquid other, like my daddy's DNA, his spots. I'm trying to cover them with this talk of beauty. I'm repenting for something. I don't know what. I wasn't meant to be born, but ain't I a beautiful bastard? And doesn't everybody want to be cleaned by slices of jailed light? Yeah, it's true. I want my eyebrows microbladed for $700. There are specific times when I don't want to be wanted. Number 1, at night. Number 2, when I'm alone. Number 3, at night when I'm alone walking to my car. Number 4, an empty parking lot. Number 5, a man approaches. 6, he sniffs me, knowing that familiar scent of pressure and piss from other men that have marked me too. 7, didn't they touch me because I was beautiful? Or did they sense what was easy to poke? I've always wondered what made a slave beautiful enough to be raped. What about the body made it worth it to commit a sin on what they deemed a damned body? Maybe beauty had nothing to do with it. Of course, it's always about power, but maybe there was a type of sheen, lacquer on black bodies baking under sun, or funk from the field, or the house slave dilating from room to room, a physiological scent that niggles, perhaps, how close desire is to the type of terror owned and familiar. When I get ready with golden highlighter, is that what I am? What I accentuate? For my cheekbone to sparkle in the spectral light of my dead belling inside me, the sparkle of dead slaves is forever in me, still so iridescent. Keats wrote, beauty is truth. Truth, beauty, that is all. I don't know what that means. I've had some dark inkling about its succinct finality. Even in class, I pretended to know what the poem was about when I would discuss Crassus and the Grecian urn to my students, telling them about art responding to art and how to make a static image sing. But even then, I was pretending. I don't want to be dumb. My worst fear, a bunch of students would all point and call me a fraud. I once asked Mark, my professor in grad school, when I would stop feeling like an imposter. He said I would feel this way for the rest of my life, which I think is closer to some type of truth, which is attractive because it provides relief to know everyone might be just as insecure and afraid of others as me, and possibly watching The Bachelorette on Monday nights. Like when I found out on the podcast Commonplace, Sharon Olds loves the show too, I squealed because I wasn't alone anymore. I'm not writing for mastery or legacy. I could care less. In fact, I might be writing against it, a way of talking back to beauty, back to the spoiled fruit on the altar of my body, to the pressurized gaze on my skin every damn day. I'm hyper aware that I'm hyper visible, says Hope Paloye, 20, from Newham, East London, the only Black biomedical student in her year at Oxford, who hasn't been broken by a touch, who hasn't been barbed by a glare. You can't write poems about beauty when the streets are full of racists and rapists and the president is a pussy grabber. I want to peg the canon. So I'm running back and forth between the house of silence and the house of shame, shouting over and over with ink-stained fingers on days when I write with Dwinde, no one can touch me. I have to take a sip after that one. I started writing long poems after the 2016 election as a way to kind of take up as much space as possible on the page. I was listening actually to another a Commonplace episode by Rachel Zucker, highly recommend, where she was interviewing Roger Reeves, and he was saying how he found himself subconsciously stepping out of the way whenever a white woman approached him, and that he was trying to figure out if he did that on the page. And when he said that, I had to like stop my car and be like, what are the ways that I'm holding myself back on the page? And I think I was afraid to take up space, I think especially as a woman and a woman of color. And so I wanted to chase a type of breathlessness, a borderlessness, to have the audacity and the lyric swagger to keep going and going and going and not stop and work against concision actively. So that poem kind of barreled out. And so, yeah. I like also using a lot of intertextuality. Thank you, Sarah. You're fast with the links. I love that. Yeah, so that poem kind of barreled out, kind of reaching for, pop culture, but also you have Keats and, braiding all these things together, something I like to do. I'm going to read a poem from my chapbook, Equilibrium. I'm going to read actually a ghazal because tomorrow I'm doing a workshop for the Vermont Studio Center. The link is still up, and I think you can still register. But we're going to be looking at making and breaking forms together. And I'm actually going to read this poem called A Broken Hustle for Walter Scott. And I remember when I was working on this, I was at a workshop actually with Ross Gay, and I was actually struggling because I was trying to stick to the strict format of the hustle. And Ross was like, just break it. And I remember being like, you can do that? You can break the form? And he was like, yeah, it's not working. And he said it so nonchalantly. And I know that sounds maybe really simple and like duh to you all, but for me, I think because I was in that like people pleasing student mode, I was like, I have to stay true to the form. I can't break it. But actually in breaking out of the form, the poem became kind of my medic of like the broken Black body under police brutality. And the root of the hustle is the sound of the gazelle when it's being hunted, when it's pendant and it's being hunted and knows it's about to die. And so to think about Walter Scott and to think about the broken hustle format and to think about what does it mean to break up that repetition, all within the poem. I wanted to kind of play with all those themes, especially thinking about the endless list, it seems, of Black bodies. Broken Hustle for Walter Scott. And it begins with an epigraph from Bertolt Brecht. You can't write poems about the trees when the woods are full of policemen. A video looping like a dirge on repeat, my soul a psalm of bullets in my back. I see you running, then drop heavy hunted like prey with 8 shots in the back. Again, in my Facebook feed, another Black man dead, another fist in my throat, you prostrate on the green grass with handcuffed hands on your bleeding back. Praises for the video to the witness and his recording thumb. Praises to YouTube for taking the blindfold off Lady Justice, dipping her scales down with old weight of strange fruit. To American eyeballs, blinking and chewing the 24-hour news cycle. Another Black body, another white cop. But let us go back to the broken taillight. Let's find a man behind on his child support. Let's become his children. Let's call him Papa. Let us chant, Papa, don't run. Stay back. Stay here with us. But Tiana, you've got to stop watching this video. Walter is gone and he is not your daddy. Another story will come to your feed. Stay back. But whisper, stay once more with the denied breath of his absent CPR. Praise his mother strumming Santana with tiny hallelujahs up and down the harp of his back. Praise his mother holding the man who made her son a viral hit. A rerun to watch him die ad infinitum. Again, we go back, click replay at any moment. A video looping like a dirge on repeat. I've been thinking about that poem, obviously in the light of George Floyd and the verdict trial, but what does it do to our psychology? I haven't watched the George Floyd video. I don't really want to, but what does it mean to have that, to watch it ad infinitum, that it can just be played over and over and over again? It's like public lynching. So yes. Okay. I think I'm gonna read some poems, some newer work. Keep reading some newer work, and then I'll end with some poems from my book. Okay, any Elizabeth Bishop fans in the audience? Okay, here's the thing. This is the caveat before I read these poems. I love Elizabeth Bishop, but I think it's important to also interrogate the poets that you love as well. So if there's any diehard Bishop fans out here, I just want to say I am also with you. But also, she doesn't get a pass either. Little Bishop Jellyfish. I don't see any Bishop fans in the chat, so maybe I'm in the clear. This is after and for Manuel Zeno. My ex-husband knew when to touch and not touch my hair. He covered my hair in the rain. He liquefied cold coconut oil by rubbing his hands together, just like I taught him, sealed my frayed split ends, but if I just pressed it, then he knew not to touch it. He knew when to shut up about suffering. If there is a way of knowing or writing the other, then I would still be unknown to him. There was still a lock sliver in me that my white ex-husband never reached despite the reaching. Perhaps a leftover colonial need. He didn't need me or want me because I'm Black, but loved my Blackness without having to make a slave or kink of me. Little Bishop's jellyfish floats bluish gray between us with such strangeness. But it's beautiful, yes? Yes, everything she writes is gorgeous, startling, precise. It stabs brightly, needling the line with her brilliant mind, poking, unspooling the image until the paint dilates, historical, fluid, and free. Elizabeth, I am not your Black Friday. Wasn't he also pretty to watch? He had a pretty body. Isn't that what you wrote? Or was this more like the moose? And you are the beast sniffing around the hot hood of these curious creatures. Elizabeth, point your exacting pen toward my body. Cut my National Geographic breast with your aunt's all-consuming scream. Elizabeth, it seems there is no grace in me today. Put your hand back in the burning, bitter water. What did the water say then? What does the water say now? You are adored here. It seems no one is allowed to say anything bad about white women poets. America loves you so damn much. You are adored here. It seems no one is allowed to say anything bad about you. America and all her massive forgetfulness loves you so damn much. And I disagree with Adrienne Rich, who wrote, I am concerned with her experience of outsiderhood, closely, though not exclusively linked with the essential outsiderhood of a lesbian identity, and with how the outsider's eye enables Bishop to perceive other kinds of outsiders to identify or try to identify with them. No, you cannot stand in the buffet line of otherness and pluck your lover's lotus throat like a guitar string or sing a few songs for a colored singer. Damn it, I don't care if this poem is too didactic. I just want to know what it feels like for once to do whatever the hell I want in a poem. The audacity. Elizabeth, if you were still here, would you have secretly voted for Trump? I admit it. I don't possess restraint. Sometimes I want to put two of my fingers deep in a white girl's mouth and repeat. I don't know if I've ever read that before. I was a little sassy in that one. I mean, I hope I still have some Bishop fans out there. When I kissed her right breast, I became myself entirely. I think I had imagined it for years. All that precise and briny desire filling my mouth like orchids made of soft, ocean-blasted skin. I wanted to linger at her chest for hours, study her nipples through a single entry point of appetite, the libidinous latitude of my longing, but I didn't want to make it weird. And I kept thinking about Elizabeth Bishop's problematic poem again, the one where she's horrified at these Black breasts, but yet she also sees herself as these Black breasts, and she's overcome by this Black wave. And the poem zooms out toward War I, and it's February, which is the month I was born in Los Angeles in 1984, and I still admire poems that fail me in my endangered, imagined Black body. And I still want to talk about Bishop and her panic and excitement, her awakening. I've taken pictures of my Black breast, trying to find traces of myself. Are you there in the waiting room? I touch my Black body and still believe. I've often dared to look, which made me think of the end of Kiese Lehman's essay, You Are the Second Person, which ends, you look down and you keep on writing, revising, reading, reckoning, working, because that's what real Black writers do. This is an acrostic poem that I was commissioned to write for a Kara Walker piece called Buzzards Roost Pass, and it's called Scorched Earth. I'll sip of my throat coat tea. Glad to know there's some Bishop fans out there. I highly recommend reading her letters. They're very fascinating. Anyone Words and Air fans out there? Letters between her and Robert Lowell. Scorched Earth. Black breasts split within a Civil War battlescape. Black breasts hewn and hacked off like discs of licorice. Butter patted over a field of white men at war. Sherman's army penetrating Georgia. Sherman marching to Savannah, not giving a shit about slaves. Does anyone know where a Black woman is and is not the linguistics of a landscape? Raped, mastered, controlled, conquered, hoed, mind fucked. Kara, why did you cut her up like that? Kara, you be knowing how the Blackie body becomes and is becoming the violent earthwork of shadow and fissure. Such discrepancy of ink. And I'm looking at your Black silk screen, thinking about the beginning of Paul Celan's Death Fugue. Black milk of morning, we drink you at dusk time. We drink you at noontime and dawn time. We drink you at night. We drink and drink. We scoop out a grave in the sky where it's roomy to lie. Kara, have you read this poem? Kara, what about that torn forearm above the frame, reaching back in the negative space, her head stippled with cannon bursts, cut flower bombs, piercing the profile, dead silhouette? Kara, would you still not answer me if I asked you about longing, about your process? I get so tired when people ask me about this one poem that I wrote. The truth is I lied. Did I have to be there for it to still hurt me? Am I allowed to conjure the possibility of pain to protect myself from the pain? Imagine the shape of my trauma like blacker breasts pointing in different directions across the gorge of my partly disembodied body. Did it have to happen for it to be true? The truth is I felt like I heard it. The truth is I still pull away from my lover in public. That's my real life. I don't trust affection. I don't know who's looking and not looking at me. I don't know who's going to read this either, but I want them to like me. Kara, I want you to like me. For that to happen, should the poem end with my hand reaching for you too? Should the poem end with you touching my Black beast? Whoops, I meant breast. Sorry. Well, sorry for saying sorry so much. Do you still want to touch my blackest breast after I've apologized? And let's say I keep apologizing and then I make this mistake again. Will you still want to touch me? Do you want to see me touch me? Sometimes I touch myself because I don't know if I exist. Once a white guy in high school asked to see my brown beauties, kissed my chest for hours. I didn't want to do it, but I did it, and I've done that so many times. Does that make my breast powerful or fierce or political? Or is there anything new they want to say about the art of Black femmes? If so, will you say it now? I'm exhausted and bored by the list of lazy adjectives. Say something new and then shoot me in the face 3 times, or better yet, hang me in my own cell and say, I did it, I dare you, I double dog dare you, do it. No one will believe you that I was murdered. Do it, kill me. No one ever trusts a Black woman's mouth. Kara, what that mouth do? And that lithograph stuck inside a locked room, singing stratocumulus clouds. I guess the weather about to change. Oh, I see one fang in her mouth. I got sharp teeth like that too. I leave a mark when I bite myself. I draw black bud and paint myself, my Black bitch head over my Black bitch history. When I was little, I prayed to God for big old breasts, but they never came. Instead, I've got massive areolas that I've just now stopped being ashamed of. It's important to be specific when you ask God to win the war, or who's going to win the war, or rather, which side's really going to win the war. All the same, when the war has always been your body. I love my Black breast. I love my Black breast. I love my Black breasts. A lot of boobs tonight. Okay. I'll read some from the book. Midnight to 3 a.m. I glare at my husband snoring and think of mulatto house slaves. Not all of them, just the ones that might have looked like me and were petrified like me, to touch themselves down there, down where it's burnt and swollen, to worship that weak part of me that's cream, to hunger the part of me that's white matter separated, the forgotten phonics of blood thickening the room with red platelets. I close his mouth, I clap my hands, I turn him over to stop and start myself. Rituals, which begins with an epigraph from Stuart Dieback. What does it matter? We may not doing it, I wonder. The most dangerous game for me is sex and syntax. Your hand so familiar and terrifying as family reaches for my name, and then my navel, which is a cup of hunger, always in that order. My hand drags after loss, after some inexact pass. The wet mood lingers, erotic with the scent of a half-peeled orange, broken by a nasty thumbnail. The moment clips and disappears again before we attempt release. This hardened honey, this slow drip of joy. Another spider approaches and then I smash it, smearing gorgeous little guts like black lotion. Strange how desire is greedy and silent in stasis. Strange how 2 bodies can grow without branches. And again, how do you diagram 2 broken bodies without parsing, without penetration? Is this still what I want? Another year, another sip of good bourbon, neat and decadent. Something like a lock unlatches. Another hard world approaches without water. Another hard world approaches without fur. Another hard world approaches and approaches without punctuation, enters without sucking salt from these 2 bodies, starved and pulsating on the brink of so much touching and not touching. I ache for grammar when it's bent and fluid. I ache for him, for her, and then for myself, always in that order, last and lust. I hum, I bang, I bite, I touch myself, my many selves. If I whimper, can I call it God? Oh God, please delay the verbs. Once in bed, you finally gave me what I wanted, but I didn't want it anymore. The whipped cream slid from your cool nipples and strings of white tears. See, I'd already eaten so much sugar that day. I was so full and sick of it. I don't normally read this poem, but I feel like we're doing it right now. I also, and I don't normally give content warnings, but I will give a content warning that this does have to do with sexual assault. So I totally understand if you want to mute me for a few minutes or if you need to leave. This is a poem called Tim, and there's like mini contrapuntals all around the poem. And so it can be read multiple ways. And so I think often when you have a traumatic event that happens, it happens chronologically, but as you go past the event, it happens kind of out of order. And I wanted to mimic those kind of triggers and flashes. And so you'll hear me have lots of different types of repetition without the poem, and things repeating. If you have the book in front of you, it's on page 28, but I'll be reading kind of different parts. And I think someone might have their audio on. Thank you so much. Okay, Tim. I don't know what happened that night. I was barefoot sprinting across a field of damp grass, and then I wasn't. I was kissing a man that I wasn't. I was on a twin bed, and then I was blank prone on the dumb floor of a dorm room. Then I don't know what happened to my panties. Do you know what happened to my panties? Who took them off? Who entered my body without asking? Who saw my cold nipples and said nothing? Who saw taupe watercoloring their rim with my 18-year-old breasts? Who broke my beaded black dress? Who keeps the hours? I can't remember. If faceless men came into that room, then they have no names. And if I could scream into that room, I'd shout to leave the coon, meaning, little girl, I say to you, get up. I don't know what happened. I was barefoot sprinting, and then I wasn't. I was on a twin bed and then blank prone. Then I don't know. That night across the field of damp grass, I was kissing a man that I wasn't. And then I was on the dumb floor of a dorm room. What happened to my panties? Do you know what happened to my panties? Who took, who entered, who saw, who broke, who keeps the hours? If faceless men came, and if I could scream, meaning into that room, little girl, then they have no names. I'd shout to leave the coom. I'd say to you, get up. Look deep inside the eyes of a baby goat, said Jessica. Her command hung at the back of the barn, lush, imperative. I gazed at the animal eyeball, needling the horizontal iris, its pupil so alien from mine, a frazzled bleak cut like the black bar inking the slit-shaped eye. But there was another baby goat I called Tim, who was screaming at the seam of a corner, and when I approached, he ran away. I knew why. Because there are hours in my life I cannot remember that I don't want to remember, and if I did, I would have slaughtered Tim. And Tim smelled this petite terror on my hectic hands, breath, and pits, spilling black grease from my pores like gasoline, slick, savage with pheromones. And every time I crunched 1 foot closer on the dank bed of matted hay and morning mud to zip the space between us, he kept leaping and running, breaking away from fear. Tim, come here. I'm going to finish with this poem called I Stare at a Cormorant, and then we'll do some questions. Started writing bird poems in the pandemic. We're all trying new things. Some of us are baking. I'm writing bird poems. I stare at a cormorant with its waterlogged wings spread open, drying off on a rock in the middle of a man-made lake after diving for food. And it makes me think about wonder, and it makes me want to pry and stretch my shy arms open to the subtle summer wind slicing through the park, sliding over my skin like a stream of people blowing candles out over my feathery body. And it makes me think about my church when I was a kid and how I lifted my hands to Jesus, hoping for surrender, but often felt nothing except for the rush of fervent people wanting to be delivered from their aching present pain, and how that ache changed the smell in the room to money, and how I pinched my face, especially my eyes tighter, and I reached my hands higher, how I, like the cormorant, stood in the middle of the sanctuary, so exposed and open, and wanted so much to grasp the electric weather rushing through the drama of it all like a shout in the believer's scratchy throat. I don't go to church anymore, but today I woke up early and meditated. I closed my eyes and focused on a fake seed in my hand and put my hands over my heart to shove the intention inside my chest to blossom. I'm still stumbling through this life, hoping for anyone or something to save me. I'm still thinking about the cormorant who disappeared when I was writing this poem. I was just looking down and finishing a line, and then I looked back up. Gone. Thank you all so much.
Thanks so much, Tiana.
Thank you. I appreciate the love in the chat too. Thank you.
Yeah, you're getting a lot of love from.
Thank you. I miss live readings and I could sense the energy. So I appreciate all the visual thumbs up and all the love in the chat. Thank you.
Are you working on, are those the newer poems that you read from a manuscript that you're putting together?
Yes, I'm really excited about my next book.
Feel free to drop any question you might have in the chat, and I can help facilitate a conversation with Tiana. I really I loved how your new work like takes up so much space. And I'm wondering how the thread gets started, and how you're able to build, keep building that, the expansion of the lyric, and also like the different illusions that get brought in. It's almost like mimicking how like the mind works, the associative leaps the mind makes.
Yeah.
And I'm wondering like how your drafting process goes with those long. I've never tried to write a really long like poem that like just gets blown out.
Yeah, I think if anything, the long poem has always been kind of waiting for me. I think it was just like the courage to step into it. Because I think all of us, I think when you're a writer, your mind is a metaphor making machine, and all of us do that associative leaping. And so I do a lot of obsessive associative leaping. And again, I pull on a lot of different texts. And so I think for me to sustain the energy inside a long poem, it's like thinking about like walking across a bridge. And I think like holding my supportive is like those other texts give me support and help me like boost forward, like a sonic boost forward. So I'll pull on an Audrey Rich quote, or I'll pull on Elizabeth Bishop's poems, and those become, I think, kind of like islands, that I can kind of like visit and then jump off and visit other islands inside the poem. I think the mechanics of a long poem are the same as a short poem, but I often have been thinking about how do you sustain that energy in a long poem? And so for me, it's the sonics, right? I like to print out my poems and read them out loud, and to maintain that energy, the image systems that I'm creating. And for me, I think it's those really hard pivots. And so in that first poem I read, The First Black Bachelor, there's actually dinkuses that are separating 7 poems. And to be honest with you, when I submitted that to the Kenyon review, I literally said in my cover letter, this might be 7 poems or it's 1 long poem. I'm not saying that's a suggestion when you submit, but all of this to say is I think all of writing and all of life is how do you become more of yourself, right? And how do you enter these kind of conversations? And I really was authentic in my cover, because I was like, this is either 7 poems or it's 1 long poem. And I kind of had a hunch that it was 1 long poem, but when David Baker wrote back, he was like, oh, this is 1 long poem. He's like, we'll publish it. And I was just so thankful that he saw that vision too. Because I think that's the other part of long poems, especially when you're a poet, is where do I submit long poem? What places take long poems? It's a lot of real estate, so it can be a little intimidating to submit them. So I think in summation, I think it was just the permission I gave myself to chase it. And then for me, that intertextuality and that and diving into the associative leaping really helps me contain that energy. And for me, I think we all kind of feel that rumbling sense when we're kind of chasing something. And when there's no surprises and it kind of exhausts itself out, then I kind of stop. And sometimes that stops on 1 page, sometimes that's on page 10, sometimes on page whatever. I don't normally in my longer poems, if I'm feeling that chuffing or if I'm on fumes, I'm not going to push myself past the point of there. Sometimes I want to push my poems past the point of failure, but it just is that I think I had all these, especially the next book I'm working on is chasing a lot of themes of desire and longing. And I think with longing, you got to have some long poems.
Yeah. It makes me think of John Murillo's poem, upon hearing that Eric Dolphy called Names for Birds. I botched the title, but that long poem, I heard him read that at the Frost Place, and it just like, it blew me away. Just the way he was weaving so many different threads. And then the gesture, like acknowledging that, like stay with me, stay like the gesture to the reader.
It makes me think of Ross Gay's catalog of unabashed gratitude, right? Like, dear reader, thank you for staying with me. Like, I appreciate it.
And Patrick Rosal's Brooklyn Antediluvian, like the long poem in the end of that collection. Sophia says that she appreciated your essay in Poets and Writers.
Thank you, Sophia. I had so much fun writing that. And, I was getting asked to write some essays early in the pandemic, and I was like, I'm still processing. I think we all were still processing everything. But at the end of the year, I was like, I think I have some thoughts. And sometimes I push myself to articulate kind of some of those things. And I just, I wanted to write about what it meant to kind of slow down my relationship to my productivity and self-worth in the poetry community and the writing community. And also I wanted to kind of talk about what I saw happening with Black artists after George Floyd and readings. And I was having trouble of wanting to be a little bit audacious and talk about, I have a metaphor in there, just like it felt like a BDSM exchange that I wasn't complicit to. And I remember asking the editor, I was like, I don't know if this is working or not, but it was kind of really important for me to talk about. Sometimes with white audiences, there's this self-flagellation that takes place, and I wanted to kind of discuss that. So, and then I also just wanted to end the essay with self-love. Yeah. So thank you, Sophia, I appreciate that.
Yeah. There was a question from Sarah about the interplay between grief, fear, and sex in your work. And I think there's more to this question because Sarah says that it's something that she's been wondering about for her own work from a craft standpoint. And I really appreciated how you read the poem Tim in your collection because it can be read in so many different ways, the contrapuntal. I don't know if you want to talk about that craft choice because you read that poem, but feel free to interpret and answer that question however you'd like.
Yeah, I think I did the mini contrapuntals as a way not only for the reader to have exit zones and escape routes, but for me to have an escape route as the poet, and then also as the speaker, right? When sometimes we enter into these really volatile landscapes within our work, how do we take care of ourselves? And so I think for me, running those short clip and even having that staccato syntactical kind of little runways that can be read so many different ways, and that accretion carries different meanings, but there's also these little blips that can happen. And so I think, again, I'm really into kind of poetry that's miming the experience of what's happening. You know, I think the interplay of grief and fear and sex is, I think, all of life, right? And I think especially if you grew up in any kind of church environment, the intersection between the sacred and sexual is so intertwined with all of those abstractions. And especially, I was often thinking about Eucharist with my friends, like you're like literally eating the body of Christ. It's like extremely violent act. And then it's like this act of salvation. And you're like eating like the blood and flesh. And I'm like, that shit is wild. If we think about like metaphor there. So I think growing up as a church kid, I think I'm always thinking about sex because I grew up repressed. And then as a poet, I'm always thinking about grief and fear, right? Because I think I think we're obsessed with those themes. And for me though, it's the tension, right? And how we kind of collide and smash those together. Like, and I think but also it's what I'm trying to get to more in my work now is the grief and the gratitude, the joy and the fear, and thinking about sex more writ large, thinking about desire and pleasure and how can I own those things. And so I think poetry is a place that I can concretize those abstractions, that I can collide those tensions, that I don't have to name things, or I can name things, or I can get close to naming something. Because with grief and fear, and sex, those are all so slippery. So how can I get close to the asymptote of those things inside the lyric, right? Or inside making and breaking a form, or the psychology of a sonnet, or if I'm going to be obsessive with a sestina, if I'm going to, with its twisting and listing, I can get closer to those definitions, but I'm never going to answer those questions fully. But it's that interplay that provides so much energy for all of us, and why we keep reading each other's work. And because, I want to know what Maggie Nelson has to say about, loneliness is solitude with a problem. And each writer that gets to have that different interpretation and definition, and we all get closer and closer and closer to naming these things, that feels so exciting. And also, yeah.
That's so generous to think that, we're all working with the same. I mean, that's not true. We're all, if grief, fear, and sex is something that someone else considers as well, that their poems, they own those themes and can write in their own way and bring forth their version of those things in their poems. And I also love thinking about which poetic form or breaking form or what craft choice can allow you to find the way to find the container that will help hold those things.
Yes. Yes.
I have 2 more questions. One from Catherine. What are your thoughts what have your thoughts been of writing poetry from a perspective other than your own, or one that you are not familiar with? And I'm not sure if you actually do that in your work. And I'm not sure if she's asking if you just speak out on that generally, like that might be like a question that I'm not really sure. I write very autobiographical poetry, and I think that the persona poem is a choice that as poets we get to choose to use to write from another point of view. But for me personally, I don't try to like appropriate someone else's story. And I'm very like careful about thinking about that. And I also have used the practice mode to help approach something through another art form.
Yeah, I don't do a lot of persona. In some ways, ekphrastic poetry, like you're saying, is a type of, like my Rihanna poem is a type of.
Oh, I love that poem. That poem is amazing. I love that poem so much. Bitch better have your money. You all should look it up. Yes. I'll find it and drop it in.
And that's kind of entering into the persona she has in the music video as a type of avatar. I'll say this, Catherine, and I'm not sure totally your questions. If you want to clarify or jump in, I'll say this writ large. You can write about anything you want. I don't know if you should write about anything that you want. Do you know what I mean? Like, you can write about anything you want. I don't know if you should publish everything that you want. I think traditionally the Western canon, has been full of people having the audacity to write about other people's experience. I'm very careful to step into anyone's experience other than my own. And there's a really great essay by Brandon Taylor, and I wish I knew it off the top of my head. I feel like Sarah's a master linker, but he talks about in the fiction, right? Because that can often happen in fiction. And he said, like, if you're going to write about a character in someone else's perspective, like, you better know what's in their pocket. You better know what their mom had for breakfast. You better know their whole life. You better know all of the textures about their family. I think for me, being a Black woman, and so much of coming on the margins, I am very hesitant to speak out of my own experience or speak for somebody else's. And I think it's something that I often see and sometimes in poetry workshops. And there's a really great essay by Major Jackson called, and I always get it messed up. It's called like The Mystifying Silence, Big and Black, or Big Black Mystifying Silence. And he said, here, white writers, it can't just be Black writers talking about race. We need white writers to talk about it too. But then he goes, white writers, we need you to talk about race, but here are all the ways that you messed it up. And he actually pulls poems from some writers that we all know saying, it's too much of a fetishizing gaze. It's too much of the interrogation of the other, when really that interrogation needs to be on the self, right? And I see that often with my students sometimes, where I think they're afraid to talk about themselves. But it's the lyric I, right? It's a collage of personal and imagined experiences. But I would really check out that essay from Major Jackson. It's really great. It's hard to find. Oh, Sarah, you are on it.
I'm just Googling.
Yeah, it's a really wonderful essay that kind of gets into the nitty gritty, I think, of what you might be talking about. So yeah, I would check that out.
Yeah, and then there's a whole new book by Paisley Rectal called Appropriate or Appropriate, depending on how you pronounce it. And she also has that. She also published an essay in American Poetry Review, an excerpt from that book, so you can find that. I have a couple of people asking you what you're reading right now. And yeah, and I think that's going to be our last question for tonight. So
yeah,
and,
I'm reading
yeah. Sorry, what do you?
I'm reading lots of my students' poems because they're about to turn in their final writing portfolios. But I've been on a really big Mary Oliver binge. And I was talking with my friend Tiana today, and we want shirts that say Mary fucking Oliver, excuse my French. But I just want a shirt because I feel like there's just a weird divide within the poetry community. Although the people that I love Mary Oliver. I love Gabrielle Cavacaresi's poem, Praise House, the New Economy, where they write Mary Oliver. I love her. I really do. But I've been reading through Mary Oliver's collected devotions, but I really love this poem called Flare. And then someone told me about that book that it came from. It's A Leaf in a Cloud, I think, or something like that. And I'd never read that book from Mary Oliver, and I highly recommend it. Is it A Leaf in a Cloud? Sorry, do you know what I'm talking about? And it's actually,
I don't, House of Light is my favorite Mary Oliver collection. But Flare, I'm not sure if I've read Leaf and Cloud. I have
or Cloud on a Leaf. It's A Leaf in a Cloud or A Cloud on a Leaf, but I highly recommend it. And there's a poem in there, a long poem in there called Flare, but it's just a short book of her longer poems, and they're absolutely stunning. I have the book somewhere around here, but I highly recommend it. It's now my new favorite Mary Oliver book. And I think she's really deceptively simple. I think when you spend time with her work, the sonic work that she's doing, the images that she's doing, the diction that she has, it's so masterful. It's so beautiful. I'm in awe of her. And, you know, as poets, we all have certain set of obsessions, and just like her and the grass and with the muskrats and the birds and the ants. I just love it. Yeah.
and she was like a total badass. She won all major prizes and existed outside of the academy, and was like she was a lesbian, and like no one like puts that label on her. Like she like anyway, I've been a fan for a while, so
I'm a huge fan. I've been enjoying Devotions. Highly suggest it. Thank you all so much for your amazing questions. I know I didn't get to all of them, but thank you all just so much, and thank you, Sarah, and thank you to the Vermont Studio Center. And
thanks, Tiana.
either I didn't get to your question, but growing up in church, God and faith, and all that is all in my work. I think the divine is something that I'm always trying to conjure and answer and reckon with. So, yeah.
Thank you so much, Tiana. Thank you for being here with us.